Welcome back to the next chapter of The Explorer by Catherine Rundle. This time, hopefully I'm fully in the video and I haven't lost half my head. This chapter is called The River. It took some time to find leaves wide and strong enough for the roof. The first batch Fred tried tore in his hands. The second turned out to have something in them that made his skin turn red and itchy. But the third tree had fleshy leaves as long as his arm. He and Leela tore them into strips and then wove them into great squares, which they wedged in and out of the branches of the supporting trunks. Con sat on the grass outside the den, digging a hole in the ground with a twig. Fred crawled into the den and looked up. The sun no longer filtered through 1,000 ant holes. The light inside was dark green and underwater sunken treasure colour. He felt an unexpected surge of triumph roar through him. "It's good," he called. "You can barely see the gaps." He heard Leela cheer. Fred backed out of the den and stood up too fast. Suddenly his head reeled, colours flashed in front of his eyes, his lungs tied in a double knot. "Are you all right?" said Leela. "I'm fine," he said, more brisk than he'd intended. Since his pneumonia, he hated being asked if he was all right. He tried to smile. "Thanks," he added. Fred had been sent to Brazil to convalesce with a distant cousin. The cousin's idea of a good time involved more playing bridge in the dark drawing room than Fred had expected, but his father had said it was the only sensible option. "I can't be at home to look after you," he said. "The firm needs me." "I can look after myself," Fred wheezed. "That's not possible," his father said gruffly. He had worked longer and longer hours each year ever since Fred could remember. Fred could not remember his mother's face, except when he was asleep. He had never seen his father dressed in anything other than a suit, and over time the suit seemed to have seeped into his father's skin. His voice practically wore a tie. "You're treating me like a baby," Fred had said. "Nonsense," his father replied. "Come on, you're a sensible boy." Fred's boarding school report always contained the word sensible, an unobtrusive presence in the classroom. Sometimes, when they could clearly think of nothing else that distinguished him from his classmates, they added increasingly tall. Fred knew he was none of these things, or rather, well, he was tall. Nobody would have argued with that. He grew out of his clothes so fast that his ankles were constantly cold. But he was not unobtrusively inside, nor was he sensible. Inside, Fred was hunger and hope and wire. It was just that there had never been yet a chance to prove it. His father always insisted so unswervingly on clean shoes and unrebellious eyebrows. But Fred's mind was quick with sharp edges. He wanted more than the world than it had given to him yet. Now he tried to grin at Leela. "I'm just dehydrated. We need to find something to drink," he said. "You can live for a long time without eating." You absolutely can't," said Max indignantly. "But you can't live for very long without water," said Fred. "Do you think we can drink from the—" Leela hesitated, searching for the words. "That tiny cesspool?" Fred looked across at the puddle of water. "We could, but I don't think we'd live for very long if we did. But we are near a river. We must be," he said. "It was on our left when we crashed," said Leela eagerly. "What direction did we run?" said Con. "Well, the sun rises in the east, so facing this way, left is the northeast," said Fred. "Well, how does that help if we don't know which direction we ran?" snapped Con. She was pale and there were circles under her eyes as if somebody had pressed paint-smeared thumb onto her face. "It doesn't much," admitted Fred, "but northeast of here was England." The thump in his chest slowed a little. Northeast led to his bedroom at home, his bookcase, his cricket bat propped up against the wall. It led to his father. Con squared her shoulders as if readying for a fight. "We are just going to have to guess then." "I heard," Fred said, "that you can follow ants and they'll take you to water." "Ants?" said Con. "We're going to take direction from ants?" Leela stared hard at Con and then at the ground, combing the leaves with her eyes. Or do you have a different suggestion? She said. Con sighed and bent to look under a log. The first set of ants was a disappointment. Max found a trail of tiny little red ones and bent down to stroke them. Look, they're shining. Don't touch, said Leela, snatching him back. Some ants out here are dangerous. These ones? Asked Con, taking a step backwards. I don't know, that's the problem. The dangerous ones are called bullet ants, but I don't know what they look like. Bullets, presumably, said Con. Not necessarily, said Leela. Dogfish don't look like dogs. I remember being very disappointed. These ones just look like ants, said Max. We're still not allowed to touch them, said Leela, so don't try. They walked at a safe distance, all four of them with their chins on their chest, along a snake line of trees. The ants led them to a large pile of leaves. Oh, Fred nudged the leaves with a stick, just in case there was water underneath. He recoiled. The ants were swarming over the carcass of a bird. It looked like it had once been a vulture. Now, though, it was equal, part bone and smell. This isn't exactly what I was hoping for. You could not, he thought, trust an ant's sense of priorities. What now, then? Asked Con, crossing her arms. Let's try again, said Leela. Maybe those were the wrong kind of ants. It was Leela who found the trail of larger ants. Ants with heads as big as ball bearings. They followed the track deep into the woods, Leela leading. Fred watched her. She was small and moved on the edge of her muscles, like an animal, a deer or a lemur, as if she had other things that people did not. I can't believe we're trusting ants, said Con. She brushed a cobweb over her hair and ducked under a branch. Even in fairy stories, it's a wise owl or something. Nobody goes to bloomin' ants for help. She looked defiantly at Fred as she said the words. And then a thorn caught on her skin above her eyebrow, and she let out a yelp. I hate this place. Fred looked back and found, with a lurch to his stomach, that the clearing had entirely disappeared. Which way is it to get back? He said. The green of the forest seemed to thump around them. Left at the tree that was covered in mushrooms, and then right at the bush with the great big thorns, said Con. She didn't look at him. She didn't seem surprised on his face, which he immediately tried to hide. We should mark a path, he said, so we can find our way back. Fine, said Con, unless you want to ask the opinion of, I don't know, maybe a passing maggot. Fred tried a grin. Well, maggots are much slower walkers than ants. They'd make terrible guides. She didn't smile back. Fred slipped to the back of the procession. Every 3 or 4 trees he broke a branch and stuck a leaf on the hinge it made. Con shook her head. That's not going to be any good to us. Need something bigger. She tore one of the ruffles of her once whitened blouse and tied it to a tree. There. Fred turned to look at her. Crouched in dappled light, she moved stiffly as if unaccustomed to her own body, and her clothes seemed to sit on her like a bear trap. There are outfits that suggest of their own accord that the owner should sit still and smile nicely. Con had been dressed in one such outfit. Before the crash had coloured it brown and green and red. Good thing you got ruffles to spare, he said, and grinned. Con turned on him and looked, with a look that breaks a nose. Shut up, cricket jumper. Fred took a step backwards. I only meant it's useful to have clothing with extra bits attached. Boys' clothes don't. Fine, whatever you say. You don't have to try to be nice to me, you know. What? Fred stared, bewildered. I just want to get out of this vile place and back to school. I don't mean to be rude, but I'm not really interested in making friends, especially not with this little kid. Leela heard them. I'm not a little kid, she said quietly. She spoke without taking her eyes off the ants. I'm just small for my age. How old are you? Con turned to Fred. Fred told her. But that's hardly older than me, said Con. And me, said Leela. I thought you were much older, said Con. Fred shrugged. No, I'm just tall, he said. But that means there's no adults. Not even nearly adults. Not even an Explorer Scout. Just 4 children in the Amazon jungle. That, said Fred. Sounds true. Unfortunately, said Leela. Unfortunately, echoed Max, as he wandered off a few paces, blowing nose bubbles with his snot. Leela darted after him and grabbed him by the sleeve. Stay close, she said. Her face was bone and eyes and nerves. As they walked on, the smell came to Fred in the air. Something sharp and fresh. Something that smelt more blue than green. Is that the river? I think I can smell it, he said. Don't be ridiculous, said Con. You can't smell water. But then she broke off. Through the thickly ranged trees, Fred could see a flicker of something moving. Come on, called Con. I found the river. They stood where the ground curved down to meet the river. The river was straight. No, it wasn't straight. The river was stark. Bright blue. Do you think there are caimans? Leela asked. Despite the sun overhead, she shivered. In the long winter of Fred's illness, he had read dozens of books about explorers venturing out into the wild, armed only with a pith helmet and a penknife. He had a shelf full, all dog-eared and food-stained, and they all dealt with great length on caimans. He decided to be on this, probably, he said, but I don't know how else we're going to get to that water. What are caimans? Asked Con. Alligators, said Fred, like crocodiles but with longer snouts. But they're smaller, said Leela. Probably, said Con. Oh, good. The caimans like the Siamese side of the bank, said Leela, and we are in the shade, so we're probably fine. Everything's a risk here, said Fred. I'm going in. Every hair on his arms stood on edge as he scanned the bank. He pulled off his shirt and then put it back on. It occurred to him that it needed washing as much as he did. He slipped down the bank, his feet squelching the mud, and dived in head first. The river was a gift. It soothed the burns of his cuts and the aches in his feet. Fred trod water and then kicked downwards below the surface where it was colder and sucked in a mouthful of water. It had a tang of mud to it, and a strand of waterweed wrapped itself around his tongue. But at that moment, it was the most delicious thing he'd ever drunk. Better than hot chocolate at Christmas, or fresh lemonade in the summer. Come in, he called. Leela plunged in after him, carrying Max on her shoulders. Con hesitated on the edge, her face stiff and anxious. We didn't do swimming at school, she said. Only ballroom dancing. She entered the water slowly and swam in a nervous doggy paddle, her chin high above the water. Fred rubbed his arms and legs, feeling his cuts stinging as he scrubbed the dirt off of them, and then kicked below the surface again. His eyes open in the dark water. A shoal of miniature fish swam by, followed by a single, larger one. He came up for air. There's fish, he called. Try to catch one, called Con. Fred plunged down again. The small fish darted away as he grabbed at them. The larger fish just ignored him completely. But there was something eerie in its shape, almost circular, like a swimming dinner plate. The fish turned. It bared its teeth at him. Fred sucked in a lungful of the river water and shot, coughing to the surface. Piranhas, he yelled. Get out! Max was floating near him. Fred grabbed him and struck out for the bank, fear pounding through his limbs. What are piranhas? Con asked. They're fish with teeth. Con screamed a word Fred hadn't expected her to know, then swallowed a mouthful of water and disappeared under the surface. Leela, wild-faced, grabbed Con by the shoulders. Don't thrash, she said. She hooked one arm around Con's waist and kicked for the shore. Just breathe. Fred and Max scrambled up the bank. Con and Leela just behind them. They lay, panting on the hot earth. Con let out a groan and spat out a mouthful of weeds. Fish? Fish with teeth? Nothing is safe here. You can't even trust the fish not to eat you. What else? Pigeons with fangs? Monkeys with guns? I read, Fred gasped, that they don't bite unless they're very hungry. They mostly eat small things, you know, birds and frogs, said Leela. She wrung out her hair. It was covered in dusting of red-brown river silt. Fred drew in a great breath and felt his heart began to slow, like it was going to do anything. It was actually quite peaceful. Silver with a red belly. Beautiful, Con stared incredulously. As long as we're not bleeding in the water, we won't attract them, said Leela. I knew that, but I just panicked. We're still safe to swim here. I think they'll ignore us. You think? Con was red in the face, sharp-boned, ferocious. They're fish with teeth. Piranhas. You can't psychoanalyze them. Leela looked at Con. Her face was inscrutable. I think, she said, that the plural of piranha is piranha, not piranhas. Oh, good, said Con. I'd always be nice to be grammatically corrected when you're being eaten. They paddled damply back to the clearing. Leela used her wet shirt to wipe the mud off Max's face as they went. Their bodies steamed in the sun as they dried. Coming back to the clearing felt surprisingly like coming home. A scarlet parrot, aligned on a branch above Fred's head, cawed in surprise at the band of dripping children and then took off. Fred found the sharpest of the flints and hacked at the bottom of his grey school trousers, making them into rough-edged shorts. The left leg was longer than the right, but he decided it didn't matter. The cut on his leg had begun to scab nicely. He pulled off his cricket jumper and wrung it out. Something in Fred was beginning to glow. Under the sun and the cry of the birds and the great expanse of vivid green around them, it was huge and dizzying. It felt like hope, though. Either that, he thought, or concussion. Don't miss the next chapter, called Food. Well, almost. Great book.